In the heart of London's competitive fashion industry, where glass towers house the world's most prestigious modeling agencies, 23-year-old Amara Thompson carries the weight of countless rejections. Born to Jamaican parents who immigrated to Birmingham in search of better opportunities, Amara grew up watching her mother clean offices in the very buildings where fashion executives now dismiss her daughter with polite but cutting words. "Your look isn't quite what we're seeking for this campaign." The story unfolds against the backdrop of modern Britain's fashion scene, where diversity campaigns often feel more like checkboxes than genuine change. Amara, with her deep mahogany skin and natural hair that defies conventional beauty standards, faces rejection after rejection from agencies that claim to celebrate diversity while consistently choosing lighter-skinned models for their campaigns. Her father, a bus driver who works double shifts, and her mother, who still cleans those same corporate offices, watch their daughter's dreams crumble with each polite dismissal. The central conflict emerges when Amara discovers that Lumière Beauty, the luxury brand that rejected her 6 months prior for being too ethnic for their classic British beauty campaign, has now stolen her Instagram photos to promote their new inclusive line without her permission. This betrayal becomes the catalyst for a journey that will test not only Amara's resilience, but also the fashion industry's carefully constructed facade of progressiveness. Supporting her through this journey is Marcus, a young Black British photographer who documents the industry's hypocrisy, and Sarah Chen, a second-generation Chinese-British makeup artist who understands the pain of being seen as almost right, but not quite. Together, they navigate an industry where Amara must choose between conforming to succeed or standing firm in her identity. This powerful narrative explores themes of racial bias, authenticity, and the price of success in an industry built on image. As Amara's story gains traction on social media, she must decide whether becoming the face of change means accepting the very brand that once rejected her, or forging an entirely new path that redefines beauty on her own terms. The fluorescent lights of the casting room reflected harshly off Amara Thompson's deep mahogany skin, creating shadows that the photographer seemed to find problematic. She stood there, spine straight despite the exhaustion seeping into her bones, wearing the simple black dress that had become her uniform for these auditions. This was her 47th casting call in 3 months, though she'd stopped counting after 30. "Thank you for coming, love," the casting director said, her manicured fingers already reaching for the next portfolio. The woman's smile was practiced, perfected over years of delivering rejection with surgical precision. "We'll be in touch if anything changes." Amara knew that language. It was the industry's gentle executioner, killing dreams with kindness. She gathered her portfolio, the one her father had spent 2 weeks' wages to help her create, and walked past the line of models waiting in the corridor, each one lighter than the last, their features closer to what the magazines called universally beautiful. The November rain greeted her as she pushed through the heavy doors of the Soho agency. London's streets were slick with water that reflected the city lights like broken promises. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. "How did it go, darling? Dad and I are praying for good news." She couldn't bring herself to reply, not yet. Instead, she walked to the tube station, her heels clicking against the wet pavement, each step a reminder of the shoes she could barely afford but needed to look the part. The platform was crowded with evening commuters, their faces buried in phones, oblivious to the young woman whose dreams were dissolving like sugar in the rain. On the train, she caught her reflection in the dark window. 23 years old, with cheekbones her grandmother said could cut glass, and eyes that held the warmth of her Jamaican heritage. Yet in every casting room, she became invisible. Too dark for mainstream campaigns, not exotic enough for diversity quotas, existing in a liminal space where beauty was acknowledged but never chosen. Her phone rang. Marcus, her best friend since university, his voice warm against the cold reality of her day. "Another no?" he asked gently. They didn't even take proper shots, Amara replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. The woman at Lumière Beauty actually said, and I quote, "Your skin tone doesn't photograph well with our lighting setup," as if lighting for darker skin is some unsolvable mystery in 2025. Marcus's silence spoke volumes. As a photographer who specialized in capturing black beauty, he knew the excuse was nothing more than lazy prejudice dressed in technical language. "I'm documenting this, Amara, every single rejection. One day, they'll have to answer for this." The train pulled into Birmingham New Street Station 2 hours later. Home felt both like a refuge and a reminder of everything she was fighting to achieve. The small terraced house in Handsworth stood proud, despite its weathered brick, her mother's garden blooming defiantly in the narrow front yard. Inside, the smell of curry goat and rice and peas filled the air. Her mother, Patricia, stood at the stove, still in her cleaning uniform from the corporate offices she'd maintained for 15 years. Her father, Devon, sat at the kitchen table, reviewing bus routes for his tomorrow's shift that would start at 4 a.m. "Sit, baby," her mother said without turning around, knowing her daughter's footsteps like a heartbeat. "Food will heal what those fools couldn't see." They didn't ask about the audition. The slump of Amara's shoulders told them everything. Instead, they filled the silence with quiet love. A plate piled high, her father's hand squeezing her shoulder, her mother humming the old hymns from their church in Kingston. Later, in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by fashion magazines she'd collected since she was 12, Amara opened Instagram. Her account, Amara Real Beauty, had 12,000 followers who celebrated her natural hair tutorials and body-positive posts. She uploaded a selfie from that morning, hopeful, radiant, unaware of the rejection coming. The caption read, "Beauty isn't about fitting into their box, it's about building your own." Within minutes, comments flooded in. Women sharing their stories, their rejections, their moments of being told they were too much or not enough. She read each one, finding strength in their collective pain and resilience. A private message caught her attention. Sarah Chen, a makeup artist she'd met at a Fashion Week event, had written, "Saw you at Lumière today. I was doing makeup for their team. What they said was bullshit. Your skin is perfect. They just don't know how to light anything that isn't beige. I'm working on something. Can we meet?" Amara stared at the message, feeling something shift in her chest. Perhaps this rejection wasn't an ending, but a beginning. Outside her window, Birmingham's lights twinkled with possibility, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a different narrative, one where she didn't have to change to be chosen, where her skin tone wasn't a barrier but a banner. Tomorrow would bring another day of castings, another round of polite rejections. But tonight, surrounded by the love of her family and the support of strangers who saw themselves in her struggle, Amara Thompson made a decision. She would document everything, every rejection, every excuse, every moment where the industry revealed its true face behind the diversity statements. She pulled out her laptop and began typing, "Dear fashion industry, let's talk about why you're really rejecting models like me." 6 months had crawled by since that rainy November evening when Lumière Beauty had shattered another piece of Amara's soul. The morning sun filtered through the cracked blinds of her Brixton flat, painting golden stripes across the walls that had witnessed too many tears. She'd learned to move through life with a peculiar kind of grace, the kind that comes from carrying invisible wounds with dignity. The coffee shop where she worked opened at 6, and Amara had perfected the art of brewing hope into each cup, even when her own reserves ran empty. Her customers never knew that the hands serving their morning lattes had once graced fashion portfolios, that the smile warming their mornings had been deemed not quite right for magazine covers. That Tuesday morning arrived dressed in ordinary clothes, giving no warning of the earthquake about to split her world open. Her phone buzzed while she tied her apron, another notification among thousands. But her follower Sarah Chen had tagged her urgently. "Amara, you need to see this now." The phone slipped from her trembling fingers when she saw it. There she was, her face, her body, her soul, plastered across Lumière Beauty's Instagram page. The photos Marcus had taken during their guerrilla shoots, their acts of beautiful rebellion in London's most exclusive spaces, now served a different master. "Embrace your truth. Lumière celebrates authentic beauty," read the caption beneath her stolen image. The betrayal felt like swallowing glass. Each breath hurt as she watched the likes climb. 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. Comments poured in praising Lumière's bravery, their inclusivity, their progressive vision. But her name appeared nowhere. She'd been erased even as her image was consumed. "They rejected me," she whispered to the empty stockroom where she'd fled, her voice breaking like waves against cliffs. "They rejected me, then stole me anyway." Marcus answered her call before the first ring finished, as if he'd been waiting. "I'm screenshotting everything." His voice cracked with rage and recognition. "Amara, this isn't just theft. This is violence. They're colonizing your image while denying your existence." Sarah arrived at the coffee shop like a storm wrapped in designer clothes, her makeup bag concealing recordings that documented fashion's ugly truths. She slid into the booth, her eyes blazing with the fury of someone who'd watched this violence too many times. "I've been recording them," Sarah confessed, her voice trembling with years of suppressed rage. James Worthington, their creative director, I heard him say they needed the look of diversity without the complexity of actually hiring them. He called it visual inclusion. "They have a whole strategy, Amara." The coffee shop continued its morning dance around them. Steam rising from machines, customers chatting about weather, life moving forward while Amara stood still. Her phone vibrated relentlessly as her followers discovered the theft, their collective pain forming a digital scream that echoed across social media. Then came the threats, wrapped in legal language but sharp as razors. Lumière's lawyers moved fast. "Your images were posted publicly. Cease and desist any defamatory statements immediately." That evening, Amara returned to Birmingham, needing her mother's arms the way flowers need soil. The small house in Handsworth stood like a fortress against the world's cruelty. Her father sat at the kitchen table, his hands that had gripped bus steering wheels for 20 years, now clenched in fury as he read the legal threats. "They steal my daughter's face," Devon said, his Jamaican accent thickening with emotion, "then threaten her for saying it's hers." The pain in his voice carried generations of similar thefts, similar erasures. Patricia stood by the stove, stirring soup with movements that spoke of barely controlled rage. 20 years I've cleaned their offices," she said softly. 20 years of being invisible until they need their bins emptied. Now they take my baby's face while refusing to see her humanity." Her grandmother called from Jamaica just as the sun set, her voice crackling across oceans but strong as mountains. "Listen to me, child," the old woman said. "Your great-grandmother cut sugarcane under a sun that tried to break her. She stood tall so you could stand taller. Don't you dare let them bend you now." That night, rain drumming against her childhood window like ancestors' fingers tapping, Amara made a decision that would change everything. She sat before her phone camera, face bare of makeup, soul bare of pretense. "My name is Amara Thompson," she began, her voice steady as a heartbeat. 6 months ago, Lumière Beauty told me I was too dark, too ethnic for their campaigns. Today, they're using my images without permission, without payment, without acknowledgement." She laid out the evidence with devastating clarity, the rejection email, the stolen images, the pattern that extended beyond her. "I'm not the only one. They're doing this to models across the spectrum of black and brown. They want our features for profit, but not our presence in their offices." Her voice broke only once when she said, "I'm not angry, I'm heartbroken. Heartbroken that in 2025, my skin is still too dark to hire, but perfect to steal from." The video exploded across the internet like truth finally breaking free. Within an hour, 50,000 views. By morning, 2 million. Too Distracted began trending. models worldwide sharing similar stories, the fashion industry's carefully maintained facade cracking under the weight of collective testimony. The abandoned community centre in Brixton had become a cathedral of broken dreams seeking resurrection. 3 weeks since Amara's video had pierced the world's comfortable ignorance, and now the space breathed with the sacred energy of revolution being tenderly born. Each cracked wall, each peeling poster had witnessed tears transform into testimony. Amara stood among the gathering of wounded souls, her presence no longer that of a rejected model, but of someone who'd alchemized pain into purpose. The room filled daily with pilgrims of fashion's cruelty, beautiful faces that had been deemed not beautiful enough, carrying portfolios that read like love letters never sent. "They told me my skin was like chocolate," whispered Amara to the group, her voice soft but carrying the weight of 1,000 rejections. But apparently, the world wasn't hungry for chocolate until they could sell it without paying for it. Marcus moved through the space with his camera, no longer just capturing images, but collecting fragments of hearts. Each click was a prayer, each photograph a promise that these stories wouldn't dissolve into silence. His lens found the tremor in hands that had signed away their rights, the hollow in cheeks that had been deemed too full, the light in eyes that had been told they shone wrong. The BBC interview had sent ripples of truth through an ocean of lies. Lumière's stock had fallen like autumn leaves, 25% scattered to the wind. But in their tower of glass and gold, James Worthington was painting Amara as the villain in their fairy tale. Sarah, still moving through fashion's corridors with brushes and shadows, sent word of the storm approaching. "They're going to destroy you with kindness," Sarah warned, her voice breaking. "They'll say you're troubled, that they're worried about you, that this is all a misunderstanding born from your pain." The assassination of her character came dressed in concern. Fashion blogs whispered about Amara's mental state, her unfortunate misunderstanding of industry standards. They painted her as a broken bird, too damaged to see that rejection was protection, that the industry had tried to save her from herself. Her Instagram disappeared into digital smoke at 3 a.m., 5 years of building community erased as if she'd been a ghost all along. Her father called at dawn, his voice carrying the kind of pain that only parents know. Someone had written cruel words on their door, turning their safe haven into a reminder that hatred follows courage home. But that afternoon, Grace arrived in unlikely form. Charlotte Williams entered the community center like a confession seeking absolution. The young intern from Lumière carried a USB drive that weighed more than guilt. It carried evidence of systematic cruelty, documented with corporate precision. "I couldn't sleep," Charlotte wept, mascara drawing rivers of regret down her cheeks. "Every day I watched them steal souls and sell them back as diversity. They have spreadsheets, strategies. They call it virtual inclusion, all the appearance of progress without the inconvenience of change." The room held its breath as Sarah opened the files. Years of emails unfolded like origami of oppression. There were PowerPoints about optimal diversity optics, spreadsheets calculating the cost of lawsuits versus hiring black models, recordings of meetings where humanity was reduced to metrics. "Dear God," someone whispered, "they budgeted for our pain." Obey! That evening, Amara sat with her parents in their Birmingham home, the walls that had witnessed her first steps now witnessing her biggest decision. Her mother's hands, soft from years of cleaning products, held her daughter's face with infinite tenderness. "My beautiful girl," Patricia whispered, tears falling like rain on drought. "You don't have to carry this cross. Jesus already carried one for us." Gee, but Devon stood tall, his shoulders bearing the weight of every 4 a.m. shift, every passed-over promotion, every dream deferred, so his daughter could dream bigger. "Sometimes," he said, his voice deep with ancestral wisdom, "someone has to be the storm that clears the air. Maybe God made our daughter lightning." The Connaught rooms breathed history. These walls had witnessed the birth of nations and the death of empires. Now, they would witness fashion's reckoning. Amara stood in the preparation room, surrounded by an army built from love and righteous anger. Her hands, steady now, applied her own makeup, each stroke an act of reclamation. The hall overflowed with anticipation. Journalists from 5 continents had gathered, their cameras hungry for truth or scandal. They didn't yet know which they'd feast upon. Fashion's elite occupied back rows, some faces soft with support, others hard with barely concealed fury. Amara approached the podium with her mother's grace and her grandmother's steel. The silence that greeted her felt alive, pregnant with the possibility of change. She looked at the sea of faces, so many pale, waiting to judge if her pain was worthy of their attention. "My name is Amara Thompson," she began, her voice carrying the melody of survival. "I stand here not as one woman, but as thousands. Every rejected model whose face was stolen, every dream that was deemed too dark, every little girl who was told she was beautiful but not beautiful enough." The first image appeared, her rejection beside her theft. The room inhaled collectively. Then came the flood. Slide after slide of systematic exploitation, each image a testament to an industry that had perfected the art of stealing souls while preaching spirituality. Charlotte took the podium next, her privilege a platform she was finally using for others. "I've worked at Lumière for 2 years, she said, her voice shaking but determined. "I've watched them build campaigns on the bones of women they broke. This USB contains everything. Emails, recordings, their actual diversity playbook. They literally have algorithms for how to appear inclusive while remaining exclusive." The evidence was undeniable. Emails joking about chocolate faces that photograph like coal. Recordings of executives laughing about those girls thinking they'd ever be the face of luxury. Spreadsheets showing they saved millions by stealing images instead of hiring models. A journalist stood, her voice cutting through the shocked murmurs. "Mr. Worthington, would you care to respond?" James Worthington rose from his back row seat, his suit worth more than most annual salaries. But as he walked forward, something beautiful happened. Models began standing. One by one, dozens of women rose, their presence a silent testimony to his crimes. By the time he reached the front, he faced a forest of standing witnesses. "This is misleading," he stammered, his usual eloquence crumbling. "We've always supported diversity." "By stealing it?" Amara interrupted, her voice gentle but devastating. "By taking our faces but not our names. By profiting from our beauty while denying our humanity." The room erupted. Cameras flashed like lightning. Questions flew like arrows. But Amara stood calm in the storm's eye, feeling her grandmother's spirit wrap around her like armor. Her phone buzzed with a message from her grandmother in Jamaica. "The ancestors are dancing, child. You've given them their voices back." The aftermath arrived like a tsunami in slow motion. Within hours of the press conference, Shroud Too Distracted had evolved into Shroud Fashion's Fraud, trending globally with the force of collective rage finally given form. Lumiere's stock price fell 40% by market close. James Worthington's resignation was announced in a terse statement that fooled no one. But victory in war always comes with casualties, and Amara was about to learn the price of her truth. She woke in her Brixton flat to find photographers camped outside, their lenses pointed at her window like weapons waiting to fire. Her phone had become unusable, thousands of messages, some supporting, many threatening. The fashion industry's retaliation was swift and surgical. Overnight, she'd become untouchable. Agencies wouldn't return calls. Brands distanced themselves. Even small boutiques feared association. "You're radioactive," her agent had said in their final conversation, not unkindly, but with the resignation of someone choosing survival over solidarity. "I have 17 other girls to think about. If I keep you, I lose them all." Her parents bore their own wounds. Devon's supervisor had suggested he take voluntary leave until the attention died down. Patricia's cleaning company had lost 3 contracts. companies that couldn't risk association with controversy, even through their janitor. The knock on her door came at sunset, unexpected and soft. Amara opened it to find an elegant black woman in her 60s, wearing dignity like designer clothes. "My name is Diana Morrison," the woman said, her voice carrying the music of Trinidad. "I own Morrison Beauty. It's small. You've probably never heard of it. But 30 years ago I sat where you're sitting. I was told I was too dark, too difficult, too much. So I built my own table." Diana entered the small flat with the grace of someone who'd learned to take up space unapologetically. "I've been watching you, child. You've done what I was too scared to do. You've shown them the mirror, and they hate what they see." "I've lost everything," Amara whispered, the weight of recent days finally breaking through her composure. "No," Diana said firmly, taking Amara's hands in hers. "You've lost what they gave you. Now, you get to build what's yours. I want you to be the face of Morrison Beauty, not despite your darkness, because of it, not hidden behind filters, exactly as God made you." The tears came then, not of sadness, but of recognition. Here was someone who saw her not as a symbol or a scandal, but as worthy of being chosen. Morrison Beauty's headquarters occupied a converted warehouse in Peckham, its walls covered with photographs of black women through decades, a visual anthem to beauty that had been forced to create its own stages. Diana Morrison had built her empire one lipstick at a time, one foundation shade at a time, matching skin tones that major brands called unprofitable. Amara stood before the camera for her first Morrison campaign, no longer hiding from her darkness, but illuminated by it. Marcus was behind the lens, his eyes wet with the poetry of watching his friend become who she was always meant to be. This wasn't just a photo shoot, it was a homecoming. "Don't pose," Diana instructed softly. "Just be. We're not selling makeup, we're selling truth." The campaign launched on a Thursday morning with a simple caption. Beautiful was never their word to define. Within hours, it had been shared 1,000,000 times. Women from Lagos to London, from Kingston to New York, saw themselves in Amara's unveiled face. The images weren't just photographs, they were permissions to exist fully. But the universe has a sense of irony. As Morrison Beauty's sales tripled, Lumière was hemorrhaging. Their new CEO, brought in to salvage the wreckage, was Vivienne Chen, Sarah's aunt, a Taiwanese British executive who'd built her career on actual inclusion, not its performance. Vivienne arrived at Amara's flat on a rain-soaked evening, holding an umbrella and an offer that would change everything. "I want you to be the face of Lumière's rebirth," she said simply. "Not their diversity campaign, the face of the entire brand. The first black woman to hold that position in their 100-year history." Amara laughed, the sound bitter as unsweetened coffee. "The brand that rejected me, that stole from me, the brand that needs to die and be reborn," Vivienne corrected. "I'm firing everyone involved in what happened. I'm implementing blind casting calls. I'm creating a reparations fund for every model whose image was stolen. But I need a face that represents this change. I need someone who won't let us forget why we're changing." The offer was astronomical, enough to secure her parents' retirement, enough to start her own agency, enough to ensure no model would suffer what she had. But it meant forgiving the unforgivable, meant becoming the face of the very empire that had tried to destroy her. That night, she called her grandmother. The old woman listened in silence, then spoke with the wisdom of someone who'd lived long enough to see how stories really end. "Baby girl, sometimes the greatest revenge is transformation. Not theirs, yours. You'd be taking their money to build our dreams. You'd be sitting in the chair they said you'd never deserve, changing rules they said couldn't be changed." Her parents were divided. Devon saw it as justice, making them pay literally for their crimes. Patricia worried it was a trap, another way to control and eventually discard her daughter. Sarah arrived at midnight with wine and truth. "My aunt is many things, but she's not a liar. She's already fired 30 executives. She's brought in black and brown leadership. She wants to burn Lumière down and build something worthy from its ashes. With my face on the match? Amara asked. With your face as the phoenix, Sarah replied. The decision tortured Amara for days. Diana Morrison, who'd become like a second mother, offered unexpected counsel. Take it, she said firmly. Take their money, their platform, their access. Use it to open doors they welded shut. I built Morrison Beauty because I had no choice. You have a choice. You can transform them from inside. The contract signing was held publicly, deliberately. Amara insisted on it happening at the community centre in Brixton, surrounded by the models who'd shared their stories. The space that had held their pain would now witness their power. She signed with her grandmother on video call, her parents flanking her, Diana Morrison and Marcus as her witnesses. But the most powerful moment came when she added a clause, handwritten. This contract includes a binding commitment to hire and fairly pay every model whose image was used without permission. Vivian signed without hesitation, and something shifted in the room. Not just a contract being signed, but history being rewritten. 1 year later, Amara stood in Times Square, watching herself look back from a billboard 10 stories high. The Lumière campaign hadn't just changed fashion, it had changed the conversation. The tagline beneath her image read, "Beauty isn't exclusive." Words that had become a movement. The year had been a battlefield disguised as a boardroom. Every photo shoot was a negotiation, every campaign a careful balance between progress and profit. But Amara had learned to navigate corporate corridors with the same grace she'd once reserved for runways. She'd insisted on approval over every image, every caption, every message attached to her face. The changes were seismic. Lumière's casting calls had become truly blind. Models were chosen based on photographs taken in standardized lighting that worked for all skin tones. The company had paid out millions in reparations, tracking down every model whose image had been stolen. They'd established a fund for aspiring models from underrepresented backgrounds. But the sweetest victory was personal. Her parents had retired, Devon from his bus routes, Patricia from her cleaning shifts. They'd bought a small house in Jamaica near Amara's grandmother, where they grew vegetables and watched the sun set over the Caribbean Sea. The woman who'd cleaned corporate offices now had a cleaner of her own. A young Jamaican woman, she paid double the standard rate. Marcus had become fashion's most sought-after photographer. His lens that had once captured rejection, now defining beauty's new standard. His exhibition, Too Dark to Fail, had opened at the Tate Modern, featuring the photographs from their guerrilla shoots. The same images Lumière had stolen, now properly credited, with proceeds going to aspiring black photographers. Sarah had started her own makeup line specifically for darker skin tones, funded by her settlement from Lumière for the recording she'd provided. Charlotte Williams had become an advocate for industry transparency, using her privilege to open doors and then hold them open for others. The anniversary gala was held at the same Connaught Rooms, where Amara had unveiled the truth. Now, instead of exposing lies, they were celebrating transformation. The room filled with models of every shade, their beauty no longer ranked by proximity to whiteness, but celebrated in its full spectrum. Diana Morrison gave the keynote speech, her voice carrying the weight of decades of struggle. A year ago, this industry tried to break a young woman for telling the truth. Today, that same woman has become the standard by which we measure progress. Not because she fitted in, but because she refused to. Amara took the stage to a standing ovation that felt like ancestral approval. She wore a gown designed by a young Nigerian designer who'd been rejected by fashion schools for being too ethnic in her aesthetic. Her hair was natural, her skin glowing with its own light, not studio tricks. "I stand here not as a victory, but as a beginning," she said, her voice stronger than it had been a year ago. Every rejected model paved this path with their tears. Every stolen image built this platform. Every no led to this yes. But we're not done. We've cracked the door open, now we tear it off its hinges. She announced the Amara Thompson Foundation, funded by her Lumière contract, providing free portfolio services, legal support, and mental health resources for models facing discrimination. The foundation would also maintain a database of companies' casting practices, creating accountability through transparency. James Worthington watched from his flat, his career in fashion over, his name synonymous with everything the industry was trying to leave behind. He'd sent a letter of apology that Amara had read but not responded to. Some bridges, once burned, light the way forward. As the gala ended, Amara stood on the balcony overlooking London, the city lights twinkling like possibilities. Her phone buzzed with a voice message from her grandmother. "Your great-grandmother is dancing in heaven, child. You've given beauty back its truth." A young black girl, maybe 17, approached nervously. "Ms. Thompson, I'm starting modeling next month. My agency said I photographed too dark, but I remembered your story, and I told them that's their problem to solve, not mine to fix." Amara pulled the girl into an embrace, feeling the cycle of courage continue. "You photograph perfectly," she whispered. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." As she left the gala, Amara caught her reflection in a window, not stealing a glance as she once had, checking if she was enough, but acknowledging what she'd always been: complete. The girl who'd been rejected for her skin tone hadn't just become the face of the brand, she'd become the face of change itself. The rain that had witnessed her rejection now witnessed her reign. Each drop caught the light from the billboards bearing her image, creating a symphony of reflections across the city. London, the city that had tried to dim her light, now glowed with it. Her story would be told in business schools and beauty schools, in boardrooms and bedrooms, not as a fairy tale, but as testimony that truth, when spoken with courage, can transform even the most stubborn institutions. The model who was rejected for her skin tone was now the standard by which beauty would be measured, not because she'd changed to fit their world, but because she'd changed their world to fit everyone.